The birth of Cardano DeFi has been an elusive event for the Cardano ecosystem. I think we all originally hoped it would happen at the Alonzo hard fork in September, and more recently, many hoped it would happen with a PAB release in December. Others would argue it already technically happened with the Muesliswap stealth launch back in November, and I would agree with them. But today we're going to try to bring into focus what's holding back the rest of Cardano DeFi. Ready? Let's go. We're going to discuss this all important question. When DeFi, when dApps, they're no longer waiting for Alonzo, they're no longer waiting for the PAB, or so it would seem. It seems like some of the pieces of the PAB are there. The PAB is no longer the crucial issue for at least some portion of the DeFi dApps that are anxiously awaited. So what exactly are they waiting for? We're going to cover at least some significant part of the answer to that question. We'll also talk about the recent hacks on Algo and Polygon. It's more auto pugilism. And we'll talk about even more signs that the mainstream crypto media, if there's such a thing, is warming up to Cardano even more. We're going to be talking about DeFi, so be aware. I own some Ardana and Liquid tokens. That is not advice of any kind. I will never give you financial, accounting, or legal advice, but I do always want to be very transparent with you whenever we're discussing something that I might have an economic interest in. So be aware, I've got Ardana and Liquid tokens. Those weren't given to me for any kind of weird promotional consideration or anything like that. I just bought those on the secondary market like any other person in the Cardano ecosystem would have on the open secondary markets. Having said that, Ryan Matovu did an excellent job of explaining exactly what was going on with Ardana in the Ardana community call today. And I think it's a little explanatory, probably of the sort of decision calculus that I think a lot of different Cardano DeFis are probably going through right now. And I think we've got a spectrum of them. We have a pretty good idea from comments by SundaySwap and Charles. It sounds like SundaySwap is, maybe going to be launching sometime very, very soon. It sounds like there are certain other projects like Liquid are going to be launching, fairly soon. In this call, Ryan explained why Ardana is probably not going to launch until somewhere in more like a June, July, who knows when window, sometime a little bit later, not in Q1, more like at the after Q2, at the end of Q2, something like that. And there are some really specific reasons for that timing. So he explained the Cardano block size is currently 72 kilobytes. You remember a month ago, they made that 12.5% increase from 64 kilobytes. And they're on this course to continue those kinds of increases until they butt up against the 5-second propagation time to 95% of the peers. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. Here's where it gets interesting. You'll remember that in an EUTXO system, we might say that ADA or another native asset is being sent to a smart contract, when in reality, that's just a colloquialism, and actually the script is being attached to the unspent transaction output. So we always say you're depositing your ADA in a smart contract, but that's just a manner of speaking. What's really happening is that your UTXO is having a script, the smart contract in essence is being attached to your UTXO. So the logic in the script that's attached to the UTXO is locking how that asset can be spent in some way, as opposed to that UTXO being like locked inside of some kind of magic box that we call a smart contract. We've talked about this a few different times here on the channel. Okay, here's where we get into some conflicts. For each transaction, Cardano has a 16 kilobyte limit on the size of the script that can be attached to the UTXO. We've also talked about that limit before. So you can see already where we're running into some problems. The script for each individual user's transaction, that would be each action they make in a dApp, like a DeFi dApp, can be up to 16 kilobytes. but we have a 72 kilobyte limit for the whole block. That's after the recent upgrade in block size. So you could only fit 4.5 scripts in each block, even at this 72 kilobyte limit. Ryan points out that might be insufficient for even just one DeFi dApp, let alone the whole ecosystem, because obviously the entire Cardano ecosystem is going to be utilizing all of these blocks. And if you're an individual DeFi dApp, you want your transaction to get into those blocks in a timely manner. This is one of the problems people have run into on blockchains forever, right? How timely is your transaction committed to the blockchain? Obviously, we have a problem. These scripts are taking up a lot of valuable and limited space in each block. The blocks currently can only be 72 kilobytes. Obviously, we're going to try to do these continued 12.5% increases, but currently we've got 72 kilobytes to deal with. And the limit on these scripts, so each script could be up to 16 kilobytes. So you can only have 4 scripts per block. We really want to be able to do better than that, because if you're doing things like some of these platforms like Ardana that might involve complicated processes with liquidations and things like that, you're going to have to commit some scripts to the blockchain, and if there's not enough space and it can't happen in a timely manner, there's a problem. Luckily, there is a solution out there. SIP33, Cardano Improvement Proposal 33, will add reference scripts to Cardano so that you don't have to attach the actual script to the UTXO. You can just reference the location of the script somewhere else on the Cardano blockchain. So instead of actually having to have the actual logic that's locking how that asset can be spent on the Cardano blockchain, you could just say, hey, apply the logic from this script that's located here. And that's going to take up a lot less space than some of these complicated scripts would take up. So SIP33 should alleviate a lot of this problem with scripts taking up too much space in these blocks. SIP33, though, should be coming in that June hard fork window, along with SIP31, which is reference inputs, and SIP32, which is inline datums, which will also help the DeFi developers in various ways. So Ryan said in the call, hey, the smart thing for us to do is just to wait for that June hard fork, when we'll get SIP 31, SIP 32, and the all important SIP 33. And then we will have to worry much less about the block size space causing problems for the Ardana protocol when we're doing complicated things like liquidations. So obviously, this is just one project's approach to this, but there are probably a lot of DeFi projects that are dealing with things like liquidations of collateral positions and things like that, who are also, for various reasons, going to wait for SIPs 31 through 33. And it seems that those will be coming in that June hard fork window. So there's probably a lot of projects that will wait until, the end of Q2 of this year before they actually launch. I think that's fine. We've waited a long time, and not all projects are taking this approach. Some other projects have hacked different ways around this issue. We already know a lot of projects are doing a lot of different off-chain things. This was probably also a big part of the motivation for Charles yesterday in his AMA to spend so much time talking about Hydra and off-chain computation and side chains, because all three of those things are ways to sort of offload some of this kind of computation and executing of scripts that would normally take up space in the L1 blocks. If all that stuff is happening on a side chain, those scripts are not going to be taking up space in the L1 mainnet blocks. Same thing with off-chain computation, same thing with Hydra. This is probably also why John Woods has spent so much time in the recent Cardano 360s talking about optimization of network parameters, specifically block size. Obviously, this is a pretty urgent, critical thing for IOHK right now, but I don't think it's necessarily a long-term problem. I think it's just kind of a short-term squeeze. We have all these dApps very anxiously waited. They all want to launch. Everybody in the ecosystem wants them to launch, but we have to sort of conservatively, carefully increase the block size and these ways in which we'll offload some of this computation with Hydra and side chains and off-chain computation. Those things aren't quite launched yet. So we have is some projects waiting for things like SIP33, these that'll accomplish some of this, some of this network optimization. And then we have some projects working on ways they can sort of do some of this work off chain so that they don't have to worry about those scripts fitting into blocks given the current network parameters. I think 2022, at least part of the story of 2022, is probably going to be us watching IOHK doing this sort of precarious dance where they are doing everything they need to do to make sure they don't in any way damage the all important root of trust that's already been established in the Cardano base layer in the L1, but also trying to get all these dApps launched in a timely fashion. Because obviously we can't really wait for Hydra and some of these other things before these dApps launch. So I think we're going to watch IOH sort of, making sure they don't damage that root of trust, but also doing a lot of different little things to create enough throughput and all the right network parameters for these dApps to actually launch before we get things like Hydra. And at the same time, we already know that the projects themselves are going to be inventing their own off-chain and other workarounds so that they can launch sooner and they don't have to wait. We also had more hacks in the recent days, this time of the Tinyman DEX on Algorand and Polygon on Ethereum. We're used to seeing Ethereum's name whenever we see these hacks and exploits. So something a little bit new for Algorand. I always find this pretty funny when you look at the notices that a project has been exploited. They say an attack occurred. The attack exploits a previously unknown bug and allowed the attacker to withdraw assets from a pool they're not entitled to. And then right below that, I mean, you can't even be reading this notice up here without seeing this down here where it says decentralized secure trading. If I was Tinyman, I would just change that headline right now. I'm sure they would argue they have some definition of secure trading and that this was an exploit that attacked funds of the liquidity providers and the traders were fine or something like that. But I would just go ahead and not use the word secure or security on the same day, on the same page that you got hacked. But what's really interesting about this hack, so we're used to these hacks of Ethereum platforms. Ethereum DeFi platforms is very normal. We talk about these all the time. This is kind of a new thing for Algorand. What I think is a little bit of a lesson, though, for those of us even in Cardano, is not that this happened on Algorand, but that Tinyman was audited by a very legit auditor. And we don't really know what's going on. We don't know if the auditor actually spotted this exploit and told Tinyman about it, and Tinyman insufficiently remediated the exploit, or the way they fixed the exploit created some other problem. I don't know any of those details, but I think the important thing here, though, is that they appear to have been audited by a very legit auditor. This should remind us that this whole auditing adversary game is a little bit of a cat and mouse game. And the cat can't always be one step ahead of the mouse. Some of these exploits are going to be brand new, innovative things like 0-day exploits that the auditors haven't thought of yet. This is still a possibility. You could have the auditors do everything they possibly can, do a very diligent job, and still have some adversary out there who comes up with something brand new that the auditors just didn't think of. This is software. This is the evolution of security in blockchain platforms. The reason we keep having these exploits, I mean, some of it is sometimes is the case that somebody wasn't diligent enough, but sometimes you just have a really smart adversary. So you need to be aware when you are locking your UTXOs with scripts. See, I'm using that language because we're in Cardano and UTXO. I'm not saying when you deposit your ADA in a smart contract like it's a magic box. When you are locking your UTXOs with scripts created by some project, you need to be aware, even if they're audited, that audit, even if it's a very legit auditor, is not a magic shield. It could be that you just put your ADA into a lobster trap. Despite all the best intentions of the project and their auditor, it could be that the adversaries just end up being one step ahead. This and every other type of possible exploit will happen over any kind of a reasonable timeline in Cardano. We're going to have all these things happen in Cardano as well. So just be aware, if you're putting any amount of ADA into a smart contract, if you are locking your UTXOs that contain any significant amount of ADA to you that will have a negative impact on your life, you need to be aware that that could be lost even if the project has an audit. Finally, even Cointelegraph is turning positive on Cardano. They ran with this article, Cardano became the most developed crypto project on GitHub in 2021. And they showed this graph. I mean, this is a pretty black and white thing. I mean, you can debate what GitHub commits actually mean and whether or not there are substantive ones versus trivial ones, but it's pretty hard to debate that Cardano had the most GitHub commits in 2021. Here it shows over 140,000 events. And while we've seen some other sort of media outlets just completely take Cardano out of their coverage so that they could, so that they could make Ethereum look better. It's pretty black and white binary thing. So at least now with black and white sort of binary things, it looks like some of the mainstream crypto media are willing to allow Cardano some positive coverage. I think this is a step forward. I think it's all kind of related to the imminent launch of DeFi, whatever DeFi projects are about to launch. And it seems like there are some. I think that's having a palpable impact on the way mainstream crypto media is covering Cardano, and it seems to be for the positive. I hope you're having a great week, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.